Hello, I'm glad to be here to help out one way or another. My name is Andy Carillo. I was born and raised in East Chicago, Indiana. Graduated from the local schools and graduated from East Chicago, Washington, class of 54. And my parents met just outside of Denver, Colorado. That's where they got married and moved to East Chicago when my uncle, my dad's brother, said that they were doing a lot of hiring in the steel mills. And he said, why don't you come down here, maybe you can find yourself a job. My parents did, they came. And my dad told my mom, let's go to Chicago on our honeymoon. And they did, they came to Chicago. Well, my dad got a job, and my mom says, when are we going back? And he said, well, let me save enough money. And they didn't buy a house, but they got an apartment and everything. And next thing you know, my mom was expecting my sister was born, then my brother, and now the family's growing. So my mom always felt, because they never returned to Denver, that she was on her honeymoon. And she used to tell people that. And but they were both born in Mexico. My mom was born in Durango, Mexico, and my dad was born in a city called Valparaiso. And the state is like when you see Indiana, Valparaiso is in Indiana. Well, the state is called Zacatecas, and it was Valparaiso, Zacatecas. And my career started in the Navy in 1952 when I went to sign up when I was a sophomore in high school. And the following year, the armistice in Korea came, so the war was over, that type of non-refundable war. But of course, I had nothing to say about that. All I could do was sign up and do my best if I could help. And little by little, my career began to advance with joining the Navy. And I went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center, went to boot camp. And then they said I qualified for going aboard ship. And the first ship they sent me to be aboard was a aircraft carrier. They trained me to be a gun handler on a 5-inch 38 cannon. And of course that was exciting. Not that I wanted to hear it go boom, but it would make a lot of noise. After that, I decided I wanted to go in. So in 1954, after I graduated high school, I told my girlfriend I was going to break up with her because I didn't know where they were going to send me. That happened in December of 1954. Got my orders in December. In January, I reported, and they told me that I was going to be sent to Anacostia in Washington, D.C. receiving station. I reported, and they said, we're going to put you in the Air Department of the Navy. I said, what happened to the 5-inch 38? They said, don't worry about that. So I get my orders, and I report up to Quonset-Port, Rhode Island Naval Air Station, Carrier Air Group 7. And they told me I was going to be a plane captain in charge of a plane. And I started thinking, I don't know anything about that. And they told me not to worry about it, that they would train me. They didn't send me to school. They were just going to break me like on-the-job training. And I did my best. And I learned how to start the attack bomber. We had to warm it up every morning, or if it was night flights, be on it ready to go. And I learned how to open the wings on the plane, because at that time they had bigger wings on these attack bombers. And I had to do my best. And I felt proud of myself because I could start up this plane, and I had never gone to school for it. But that was easy. But there was an 18-point sheet that I had to see that it was ready to go. Fueled. Anything that the pilots reported on the last flight, they had to be, like lights weren't on, light coming on the dash, and making sure that it was ready to go at day or night. The guns wouldn't fire, make sure that there was something wrong with them, everything that the pilot said. And he looked at it, and anything that he checked off or had told me, get this fixed, Andy. I had to make sure it was repaired and by the right mechanics. If it was electrical, by the electricians, and make sure the parachute was ready to be used for his flight. And away they go. When we were getting ready to go overseas to what they call WestPac, Western Pacific, they start telling the pilots that they were going to start going aboard the carrier. In this case, it was the USS Hornet, CV-812. C for carrier, V for lighter than air, or I don't remember if it was heavier than air, and 12 was the ship number that they assigned to it. A was for attack. Any aircraft carrier that had the CVA was an attack carrier. If it was L, it meant light carrier, a smaller one. And they called me and they said to me that your plane's going aboard ship. And I didn't know. We were at Miramar Naval Air Station, which was known as Top Gun at the time. And when I asked, where's the ship docked? They said, it's at sea. I said, well, when's it coming back? He said, don't worry about it. I said, what do you mean don't worry about it? How am I going to get aboard? He said, we'll fly you aboard. And I thought they were kidding. So I asked one of the older sailors, I said, what are they talking about? They said, yeah, Andy, you're going to make a carrier landing. I don't know anything about that. I said, don't worry about it. They was always telling me the same thing over and over again, don't worry about it. And this was just 2 months after I joined the air group. And they had just gotten back from Gitmo with the new pilots. So here they were going to send them out to sea now on a cruise. So here they brought a TBM torpedo bomber at the base, and they took out the guns, the radios, and everything, and they put seats in it, and they made it like a Airbus. And a week later, the orders were issued. It wasn't just by word of mouth. Orders had to be issued in case the plane crashed, to notify next of kin who was aboard the plane. And there were 4 of us that fit in there comfortably. And we flew out. And then I asked one of the guys, what's it feel like? One of the other sailors who had flown before. And he says, get a 100-yard rope. Oh, I said 100 feet, I should say. Tie one into a tree, tie the other one around your waistline, and just start running. When it tightens up, the hook caught. And so now I had a good idea, but I never tied. I had no rope to tie around a tree. But I made my first carrier landing there, and I didn't know if in other cases, in case the plane would have to land someplace else, was I going to do the same thing again. But it was just that one carrier landing, and by making that, what the pilots call a trap, when their tail hook, the plane they're flying, catches the cable, they call it a trap. And I never asked one of the pilots, because they would probably have asked me, why are you so interested in that? Do you want to go to flight school? And I just watched these planes come in and I always said a little prayer for them. I've always been emotional about watching them take off, land, and sometimes hit very hard, where the wheels came off the plane because they landed so hard, the weight slams down. If you're down below deck when the planes are landing, it sounds like a train, two trains hit head on. And you can even hear the scrape of the hook because the plane is pushing down on that hook. So you hear the scraping sound, then you hear a heavy crash. And now, before the tailhooks didn't come up so easy, now they made them so that they hit a button and the tailhook just comes up, the cable straightens out right away, clears, and the pilot comes forward. The plane handlers, the yellow shirts, are the ones that begin to wave to them which way to follow. And it's very, very scary. The one thing that one of them told me was never turn your back on any plane that's coming in, because they could hit, landing the deck, bounce up over the cables, clear the cables, and crash into the planes that are parked. And I did see one jet once when my plane had landed. I was sitting under it, watching the planes land, when one of them, the hook broke. The hook broke, it continued to come forward, crashed into a cherry picker, spun out of control, went over the side. And the pilot was rescued. He got out of the plane in time after it crashed into the ocean, and a helicopter picked him up right away. The new sailors, everyone has to serve 3 months down in a galley. And I was a plane captain in charge of the plane, so I was always up on the flight deck. And I was doing such a good job that when my time came, they kept me up there. And they kept another sailor down in the galley. And they told me that they had to let me go and take a turn down there in the galley, because the ship had 2,500 men, the carrier, and that was with ship's company, a crew as well from the flight air group. And so I got to go down there, and I was in charge of the deli section. It was my job to make sure there was plenty of carrots, apples, whatever was going to be served that day, and plenty of mashed potatoes, so on like that. And one day, the head cook came out and said, "I want you guys to come out here and look at this." So we went from one compartment to another, and there was a big table with hamburger meat. It was hamburger day. We were going to make 1,225 hamburgers. And I remember grabbing the hamburger meat and patting me, said, and he's talking to the rest of us, we have to make all these hamburgers, that hamburger meat into hamburgers, and as fast as you make them, we'll gotta throw them in the ovens. Now this is earlier, before lunchtime yet. And he kept hearing this sound real quick. It was me, I was making the hamburgers already. And he turned and looked at me, and he says, "You see what he's doing? You guys follow him. You do everything that he does." And we started making the hamburgers right away. We were filling the trays. As soon as we finished the trays, they were going into the ovens. The forward galley, this was the aft galley, the forward galley was making the other 1,250 hamburgers. So that's how many hamburgers were made that day. We make the cruise to the Far East or to the Mediterranean, and we stay on station unless a war breaks out that we don't return home. And in 1956, I was 2 months from leaving when Israelis and the Syrians got into it. Well, they ordered us to prepare immediately and cross the Atlantic Ocean on our way from our base, and we were down in Cuba, Guantanamo, where they train the pilots for further advancement in their flights. And we were racing across the Atlantic Ocean. 2 other aircraft carriers we found out had left Norfolk, Virginia, so 3 aircraft carriers were on their way to support the Sixth Fleet when they realized that we had new pilots and weren't ready for combat yet. So they stopped us in the middle of the ocean and told us to go back to what they nicknamed Guantanamo, Gitmo. And we went back to the base and we just continued with them there. Being in the services, being a plane captain, my job was always working with officers. And you learn to respect them because they're superior to you. And whatever you do, it's always yes, sir, no, sir. I've never in my life was taught to have an attitude, because you're not going to get anything from having a bad attitude. The better you make your life is by being respectful. And you learn that. You have, every now and then you have some that you're not going to tell me what to do because they probably had no discipline at home with their raising, with their family. You always wanted to be the wild one. And little did I know that when I went back to work on my job in a steel mill, after 20 years, I became a supervisor. And it helped me to, like I say, be respectful. And at the time when I became a supervisor, I got the respect from my fellow workers because now I was telling them what to do. In 1965, I decided to do wedding photography. And I did wedding photography up to about 3 years ago. And I used to get booked every Saturday. I had even 2 photographers working for me because my business picked up. Plus I was working day shift, 4 to 12, midnights. And family raised, to raise 3 boys. And each one had their own career. The second oldest son became a Gary police officer. The third one is a professional photographer. And the oldest one is that just called the one from California. And my daughter became a medical transcriptionist. And my wife became a teacher. And after she went to school, she was the last one. All my kids are starting to become 60 in age. And they were all born 2 years apart. But I understood my responsibility, and I became a foreman. And then the last 6 months, the general foreman was leaving the department because they were going to close our department down. And he gave me the responsibility of being the general foreman. So I feel that I didn't graduate at the top of my class, but I wasn't afraid to take responsibility.